Good morning, members of Parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, and those following via social media. Welcome to this meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee Electoral Reform, number 2 of today, Tuesday, February 21st, 2023. We have established a quorum of 6 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. I have received notice of absence from the following members. MP Bijlani. Are there any notifications? I see no need. We have as agenda point for this meeting discussion on IS 011 and IS 109 and the positions of each faction in Parliament regarding the proposed amendment to the Kiesbesluit, IS 359, 2022-2023, dated January 17, 2023. MP Melissa Gumbs requested this meeting because they have it here as MD. We go over the agenda point. On January 17, 2023, Parliament received a letter IS 359, 2022-2023 from MP Melissa Gumbs, in which the MP requested that this committee meeting be convened with the above-mentioned agenda point. Hence today, this meeting. At this time, I would like to give the floor to the Member of Parliament, MP Melissa Gumbs, to elucidate her request. MP Gumbs, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and good morning to you, to my colleagues, and to those joining us online or via other mediums. Madam Chair Lady, I'll just try to be very brief in my opening remarks about why I requested this meeting. When you ask people in the community what they think about electoral reform, and even some former and current politicians, they say you need to change Article 59 or 33 of the Constitution, or that we need to find a way to stop shift jumping by members of Parliament, and that to them is the entirety of electoral reform. This faction's position has always been very simple. Checks and balances in the Constitution exist for a reason, and declaring yourself independent from a faction is the right of any member of Parliament. What we've historically faced is issues of character, and as we have consistently said, you cannot legislate character. The reality is that electoral reform in any country can already be effected with small steps that yield large results, and it starts with the democratic process of casting your vote. A country's democratic processes are some of its most sacred. These processes, like all others, actually will face challenges by bad actors hoping to erode their integrity. The request to remove the curtain from our voting booths by amending the Kiesbesluit or election decree is something that I've been focused on since even before deciding to enter the political arena. Its redundancy should be obvious to anyone, even me as a first-time voter when I turned 18. The 2- and 3-meter walls provide more than enough privacy to allow voters to be able to cast their vote. But as technology behind mobile phones has rapidly improved, the curtain becomes less of a protective measure and more of a facilitator and an opportunity provider for those who would hijack a democratic process to do just that. Whether by taking a picture of their cast ballot as proof of sale or conducting the infamous Bulgarian train, which is the recurring process of casting pre-filled ballots, the presence of the curtain makes it possible. The appearance of dummy ballots in the cast votes pool is actually in most countries an indication that the Bulgarian train is running. Locally, we have had dummy ballots make appearances in the 2014 and 2020 elections in the votes cast pool, most notably. Today, Madam Chair Lady, I'd just like to remind the public that while we are giving our positions and thoughts on this topic, the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers does not actually need our stamp of approval to move forward with the decision to remove the curtain. If it is the right move for the country and to protect our electoral process, I trust the Prime Minister and the government by extension will see fit to do so. The PFP's faction position on this issue has been made clear in our 2, soon to be 3 letters to the Prime Minister, as the government continues its much talked about trajectory towards electoral reform. So I look forward to hearing from my colleagues on this issue and the discussion to follow. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Gumbs. Which member of parliament wishes to have the floor? MP Heilige Martin, you have the floor.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning to everyone listening and viewing online, and good morning to my fellow colleagues, and good morning to those sitting in the tribune. First of all, Madam Chair, I would like to thank MP Gumbs for taking the initiative to have this meeting. Electoral reform is something that will benefit the democracy of St. Martin in general, and ultimately each and every individual voter as well. We have had a number of meetings on this topic over the years, with a number of proposals being brought forward and discussed. So I'm happy that we have now reached to the point where, as legislators, we will formally propose changes to the current law, or suggest changes to the current law. The proposal of MP Gumbs has the support of my faction because it will contribute to the transparency of our elections, and adding barcodes to the individual ballots, as I suggested to the government in November of last year, will limit the risk of ballot manipulation and increase the efficiency of the ballot counting and verification process after the polling station have closed. I therefore look forward to the follow-up of the government on these proposals, which will enhance our democracy, I stated before, of St. Martin. And finally, Madam Chair, I want to again stress on the responsibilities of the voting public. Voting is, of course, a right and a free choice. But we all as voters should remember that we get the government that we vote for. As Sugar Aloes, the Calypsonian in Trinidad once sang, you get the government you deserve. So it is the individual responsibility of each and every one of us to vote for the persons we believe is the right person for the right reasons. With that, I would like to end my statement, and I thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Heilige Martin. I now give the floor to MP Solange Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you. Good morning to the SG, my colleagues, and good morning to the people of St. Martin tuned in. Madam Chair, first I would like to commend MP Gumbs and PFP for this proposal. Vote buying has been an unfortunate staple in St. Martin politics forever. And although the reform process of our electoral system will take years, it is complex. There's a myriad of ways in which changes can be done to how our voters vote and how elected representatives are chosen. But I believe that this is a good start. Article 12 lays out the design of the voting booth, and this is the amendment in which the proposal has been made. Removal of the curtain is simple. However, I do believe that the presence of other persons in the voting booth should also be looked at and specified to ensure privacy, right? So if the curtain is removed, then we must ensure that maybe security guard or those administrators in that area are not directly behind the voter. And so privacy will be ensured. Another thing, Madam Chair, is that Article 12 does not lay out any instructions for the design of voting booths for persons with disabilities. We often forget those persons who are in wheelchairs and who may have an issue standing. Can we look at that as well as an amendment and ensure that for the future, persons with disabilities are not forgotten? And so to conclude, I support this proposal. I also believe that discussion, unless we have already received advice from the main voting bureau and the electoral council, their thoughts on the amendment, I think would be important as stakeholders. But I support this proposal, and I look forward to seeing changes made in accordance with the proposal. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Duncan. MP Westcott-Williams, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and a good morning to you, a good morning to our staff here at Parliament. Good morning to my colleagues. Good morning to those in the tribune here at Parliament, and of course those tuned in to this meeting via different means. Madam Chair Lady, I want to also commend the PFP faction for not only submitting this proposal to government, because as rightfully indicated by the faction, it is the prerogative of government to do such. But in addition to that proposal, it has also been brought to this committee in order to strengthen the position or to enforce the position of the faction by the different factions who desire to do so here in Parliament. And I think with these type of issues, Madam Chair Lady, if we're not getting a concrete response from the government, it might warrant calling for a public meeting for this, if you can call it a decision in this committee meeting, but for that decision, that proposal to actually be a sort of, and I choose my words carefully, instruction to government to have it done. Yes, I know the government has responded in the case of the proposal from the PFP. They have responded somewhat positively, but what I miss is, okay, so if you think it's a good idea, how and when will it be put into effect? Again, I want to repeat that it has to take place by the government. In addition to that, Madam, so let me go back. So I support the proposal which is here, and I think we have to maintain the pressure on getting it done by the government. Madam Chair Lady, the matter of one of the reasons for eliminating the curtains, as also put forward by the PFP faction, and that has to do, which is locally called several things, amongst which the Bulgarian train, and it brings into play, even into question, the whole issue of digitalization of the electoral process, not only as a proposal by a colleague, MP Heiliger, in terms of the ballot, but generally speaking. So while, yes, electoral reform, just taken from a general perspective, is a very long and comprehensive, can be a very long and comprehensive project, I do agree that there are incremental issues that can be dealt with and can be dealt with quite easily, so to speak, and not having to only look at our electoral system, the way that we elect our representatives, and the discussion that has been ongoing with respect to should we have elected executive members or not, elected prime minister or not, et cetera, et cetera. But that's your electoral system and changes to that. So, Madam Chair Lady, from the perspective of this committee, I asked myself, since the proposal for the coding of the ballots has been sent to this committee as well, should be sent. We had it yesterday as an incoming document, and the referral is to this committee. Question is, when will the meeting to discuss that be held? One. Secondly, the proposal for electoral reform, for legislative electoral reform, which has been put into a terms of reference for interested parties to submit proposals to assist with the legislative electoral reform. When is that proposal going to be handled or further handled by this committee? And thirdly, in addition to the proposals from colleagues Gumbs and Heiliger, I too have put proposals with respect to the electoral process to the government of St. Martin. And I have actually asked the government's opinion on two issues, one having to do with the declaration that candidates have to sign as part of our laws, acknowledging their support for the candidates list and the candidates with whom they are joining. That's a requirement right now, that all candidates signed to the list of which they make a part. So my question in that context was, can we not make it a stronger declaration by candidates, since they already have to do that anyhow? Could we make it a stronger declaration, a more binding declaration, is my question to the government. And with respect to the signatures necessary, so-called the supporting signatures for any list, except those who are currently holding seats or having seats in the parliament. And my next question to the government is the government's thought on making that a requirement across the board anytime we have elections. Madam Chair Lady, in addition to that, I thought that was my last point, but it's not, because I wonder, and through this committee, I don't know if some, again, for the lack of a better word, pressure can be put on the request that the government give us some type of information and insight with respect to what is being heard out there, that it's the government's intention to call early elections. This is not a matter, it's not a calling of early elections that is the primary part. It is actually the dissolving of Parliament. That's the primary part. And if it's government intention to, within the not too distant future, to dissolve Parliament, my question to government has been and continues to be, what is the reasoning behind seeking to do that? So I hope to get some answers, and I would ask this committee, where questions that fit into this committee's purview, where those questions are concerned, to remind the government of their obligation to respond to questions of members of Parliament. And Madam Chair Lady, coming back to the specific proposal that we are discussing here this morning, and as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't need much discussion. It's as clear as day what the proposal is and what it can help. But then I have, since this proposal has been made, actually, it makes me wonder, when we count invalid ballots, because as you know, right now, the certification, if you wish, of a ballot is done by a signature on the back of the ballot. So we have a proposal that that certification of a ballot or the ballot system be done by a scan. That's the proposal which is there from MP Heiliger. But then that brings to my mind at least the question, so is it that you don't have a dummy ballot per se, but you have a falsified ballot that is counted in the invalid ballots? So you have a falsified ballot, because again, our certification currently is a signature on the back of the ballot. So when that goes into the ballot box, then you should be able to see that that signature is there. So my question in connection with what was mentioned by the PFP faction in support of their proposal, so is it that actually falsified ballots are accepted and counted as an invalid ballot? That's my question in connection with this topic here. Because then that brings, in my opinion, into play another question. Or is this entire matter about the Bulgarian Bulgarian train or whatever we call it, is that a totally different issue. I hope you get my point that I am raising now and that I have raised with respect to this particular matter. So again, invalid ballots, and the law states what is an invalid ballot. But do we also have falsified ballots that have been passed as ballots, has been dropped as ballots, and basically then counted to be invalid because when you open it, you see it was what we commonly refer to as a dummy ballot? That's a question that is still on my mind, and I hope to get an answer to as I talk to some of the persons involved directly in that process. So, Madam Chair Lady, it goes, I guess, by what I've stated, without question that I am in total support. In fact, I think we should even more strongly push for it that the government do, because this, it's a nice idea, and we will look at it. And next one they have under advisement, others they can't answer to yet, etc., etc. But if we are serious about supporting the proposal, then I think we should document it, we should approve it in a public meeting as a decision of hopefully a majority of Parliament to have it done. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Westcott. I now give the floor to MP Pontiflet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to the Chair, my colleagues, Parliament, or Griffier, those that are viewing, and our special guests sitting in the tribune. Good morning once again. Madam Chair, you cannot legislate morality or character, as one of my colleagues stated. I like to look at the difficult things, Madam Chair, difficult things. For instance, because yes, we have systems in place, we have laws and so on that you should follow when it comes to the electoral process. However, how can we address, for me, the most important issue? The candidates or the politicians who postulate themselves, or the persons, the voters. How do we ensure that they don't sell the voters? How do we ensure that the politician doesn't buy votes? You see, I understand what you're trying to do here. We have a law, we have laws we have to follow, but how do we enforce that one? I applaud the fact that my colleague is making an attempt to do so, and I think that it's important that we do whatever we can to ensure that as much as possible, elections are done fairly. What I would have loved to see, or what I would love, not would have loved, would love to see, is that we find a way to cut back the issue of the process of when you're campaigning, when you have to go to institutions or whatever in order to get campaign funding. But that will be almost impossible. You see, the clue is, Madam Chair, is that we have to inform the public. I think there should be more informational sessions going out to the public as to the validity of their vote, because yes, I heard it said that you get the government, let's say the Parliament you vote for, but in essence, that is not really true, because you can jump from one place to the next once you're elected. So that is not really true. So I think, for me, what the effort should be put into is informing the public as to the validity of their vote. Because, again, we have heard it said over and over again, oh, I voted for X, Y, Z, or the politician can say, he or she can say, look, you came to me for funding, I gave you funds and so on, or the voter, and then that's it, I wait for you another 3 or 4 years. That's what I hear all the time. I've been it long enough to hear. That is what I'm hearing all the time. And to be honest, this is not going to change it. But again, effort has to be made. I'll close by saying this. The issue of digitalization, it sounds good, but if someone can hack into your system and take control of these things, then you are in trouble. GB is a prime example of that. I'm not saying not to do it, but I'm saying how safe can it be? How much can you protect it from being hacked? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Pontiflet. I now give the floor to MP Westcott Williams.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair Lady, and I would want to propose to this committee that a follow-up be given to government's actions with respect to electoral reform. As you know, some time ago, after being apprised of Parliament's efforts as far as electoral reform is concerned, the government announced that they had their own trajectory for electoral reform. In fact, on a proposal from the Prime Minister's office, some members of Parliament have met with the persons involved with this process. That is already some months ago. And so I would recommend to this committee that the government be asked, the Prime Minister who's responsible for election/electoral reform, be asked to provide this committee with an update on the project by government for electoral reform. Is a proposal to this committee. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. I give the floor to MP.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning to you. Good morning to our Khafid, my honorable colleagues. Good morning, and those in the Tribune. Good morning to everyone. Madam Chair, I wanted to look at this as something being practical in the sense of physically, what is the intentions really for it to be done in terms of moving the curtains? Is it for more security? Is it for more fairness? Is it for more equality? What exactly is it for? I'm asking those type of questions because it plays over in my mind over and over. How is it going to be done? Because as it is, are we keeping the same boots then? Because as it is right now, you walk into the booth and your back is towards everyone else that's inside the hall, if I should say. So what you have sometimes, Madam Chair Lady, or most often times, what you have is a representative of every political party inside a booth. Not a booth, but inside a hall. And what are they there for? They are there to see who all came in, and when the number is called off, on the ballot, they would mark down this number and they would mark down that number because it works for them to see how many votes was cast thus far. If you could if you have a little resemblance of this individual, and you could say, well, this one is an NA, you know, so yeah, this one come in. So one of ours just come in. You know, I have been in the hall so many times, and this is what goes on. You also have the staff that works there, and you also have a police officer who does be there most times. But you have a curtain. You have a curtain. So those that are behind you can't see what goes on with you inside of the booth. Now, Madam Chair, with the removal of the curtain, because this is what I'm asking, are they going to turn the booths around? Would our backs still be facing those in the back of us? Because if that is the case, Madam Chair, most of the times a ballot is about the size of this. Most of the time, the ballot is about this size in width. Most times. And because you most times you have 5 and 6 and 7 parties. So now if you have 8 political parties, you have a ballot about this size. I'm just asking the practical question because now let me stand up and say I go into the booth with my ballot like this, Madam Chair. If I go in with a booth and this is my ballot and I take the pen, but there's no curtain behind me. There is no curtain, and I'm taking the pen because now the pencil, the red pencil, you have to circle inside a small little dot that they have. You have to circle inside. But now there's no, how should I say, privacy. There's none because now the curtain is removed, and you have the different parties coming down. If I'm standing and everyone is behind me, and I take that little red color pencil and I do so. But everyone else who is behind me, who have a ballot, a dummy ballot, And you have dummy ballots. You have dummy ballots. So the political parties that's inside, that's taking the record, they have dummy ballots. So they know how the political parties are aligned on the correct ballot. But there's no curtain behind me. There is none. So if I take that red crayon or that red pencil and I have to mark here, those behind me would automatically see which side this person put that mark on, or if I shift this way, or if I shift in the middle. That's what I'm asking. How is it going to be when you remove the curtain? Because it can't simply just be removing the curtain. It can't simply just be removing the curtain. Okay, we remove the curtain, and then what? Because then there's no more privacy, there's no more secrecy, there's no more I am of my free will and intentions to go and vote. I sure if I mean, whoever is behind me and I put my pencil mark here, or my pencil mark here, or my pencil mark here, they're going to see it. Is it going to be a case now where I have to scooch down like this and try? How is it going to be, Madam Chair Lady? Those are the questions that I'm asking with the removal of the curtain. So I'm asking my colleagues that presented it, is not against or for, is removal of the curtain and what in terms of secrecy, security, privacy, for one to have that free will to mark on their ballot their choice who they want to vote for. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Emmanuel. I give the floor to MP Gumbs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just if I could have the opportunity to respond to some of the questions. So the goal is to remove the curtain to protect the electoral process. I've only participated in one election as a candidate, as a party leader, but I was never offered the opportunity to be inside the polling station while votes were being cast. I voted Melford Hazel. I was held in a line, allowed to go inside by myself. There was no party representative from any of the parties in there marking off anything or checking off anything. It was just the staff, the security. I'm not sure how it goes at other polling stations, but I assume all of us live in different districts, so we can weigh in on that. But at my polling station, that was not the setup, nor were any political representatives allowed inside. So privacy is guaranteed by the walls that already encircle and encapsulate the voter. The curtain allows for the voter to disregard the signs that are outside each polling station to not use your mobile phone. When you close that curtain, is you, the ballot guard, and your phone, basically. So the motivation to remove the curtain is to take away that opportunity of the voter to sell their vote. And I 100% agree with MP Pantoflet that we need to do a lot more work to educate the voters on why selling their vote is actually bad for them and for the country in the long term. I also want to state that in the original document that was sent to the Prime Minister, I already provided examples of the fact that if you look at within the kingdom, for example, St. Martin and Aruba are the only two with a curtain still. Sabre does not have a curtain, and they have a much smaller population than we do. So if the concern is who could see you move into what party on the ballot, I think they would have to also kind of be worried about that, but they don't seem to be. Their elections have continued fair and free and open. Statia does not have a curtain, and Curacao does not have a curtain. So I think that if, you know, our fellow islands are convinced that their privacy as voters is guaranteed and ensured by the walls that still surround the voting booth and the voter when they go in, I think that is not something that should concern us too much here on St. Martin. And that's thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Gumbs. I give the floor to MP Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you and to the members of the Electoral Reform Committee. I'm not a member of this committee, but when I saw the topic, because even the way it was worded, it was sort of position on, so I wanted to at least be present to see what the idea behind the intention of the meeting was. And I think it was good to hear a better explanation on what exactly is being proposed, and now we see some of the questions that I myself also had in looking at such a proposal. But nonetheless, I do think it's a good discussion to be had, and it's good to see the Electoral Committee in action. One thing that struck me from the proposal regarding the curtains is the reference to Holland. And I think in Parliament, we are too inconsistent with sometimes saying, well, what works in Holland does work there, and then sometimes at the next breath saying, yeah, but you can't compare Holland to St. Martin. That is an inconsistency that I'm noticing. And if something is good in Holland and we think we can apply it, just say, well, I like how Holland does it. But let's not make it that that's the gold standard. And then on the other hand, for other issues, you say, yeah, but that can never work in St. Martin. Let's just be consistent that you use that as a case, but not kind of putting Holland or Curacao or other countries as if there's a sort of pressure on the member of parliament to say, oh God, I better agree to this proposal because Holland doing it and Curacao doing it and Sabre doing it. St. Martin is an extremely unique place. We have to take an amalgam of different ideas and apply it to our country, due to our size, due to our border, due to our cultures. So all I'm saying, that was the first observation. I understand the premise of looking at Holland, but what I thought was maybe a fairer way to look at it is what is maybe an international standard, okay, that gives you best practices, not telling you this is how you got to do it, but some best practices. And when I researched some of the best practices or which organization tends to support countries with that is I saw the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. And regarding balloting, they state the following. The provisions in the legal framework regulating control and security of the ballot, as well as the provisions for governing the casting of a ballot at a polling station, should ensure a balance between both security, while at the same time ensuring that no individual ballot can be identified as having been marked or voted by in a particular fashion. So the general guiding principle is that, yes, there's a balance. We see a proposal that is, let's say, trying to solve one part of the issue, which they also go into. Ballot secrecy is an effective counter to vote buying, to voter intimidation, and to other undue influences. However, no member of a polling station committee or any other person, except during the counting of ballots, should allow to see the manner in which a voter has marked a ballot. So while they are admitting that, listen, you have to kind of put some measures, they directly call out vote buying. But in all their research, we're not the first country in the world that has probably encountered this issue. And then you have an international organization that says, look, we understand you need to fix this issue, but you have to reconcile that with the issue that MP Emmanuel brought up, the right of a person to feel comfortable and secret when they are voting. You know, one thing that I believe in this country that is more democratically damaging than vote buying is political intimidation. Because of vote buying, the person, we heard of people maybe taking money or they're not messing with them. You see people marking the ballot all over the place. But if I have a fear that for the next 4 years, there's somebody from a party that will not like the fact that I vote on this side of the ballot instead of that side of the ballot, and then my job as a civil servant is in jeopardy or my contracts are in jeopardy. This has been happening for decades in this country. And the one day that the people of St. Martin have a way to voice and say, I don't like the way that party or this party is moving, is that day. And because we believe that there are some bad apples, what do we think vote buying is? 10%, 20%? Even if you think it's 40%, which I think is ridiculous. The vast majority of the population is not doing it. So are we going to, as recommended by the IDEA International, that you reconcile the need for voter secrecy with voter right to privacy? That is all I'm observing from this proposal, and I think MP Emmanuel kind of illustrated one of those reasons well. Perhaps maybe the way that the positioning is there, we don't have huge halls. Like when I voted in the Netherlands, I mean, it was the size of a gymnasium. You know, when I come into that gymnasium, the chances of that person in Harlem even knowing who Rolando Bryson is nil to none. But when I go into a polling station, every single time I voted in St. Martin, I see at least 4 or 5 people that know me personally. This is a small society and we have to account for those issues. So I'm not saying that there needs to be some measures put in place. I'm just asking that we take the balanced approach that international organizations are making recommendations on. Further to that, I guess a bit of a more technical issue. The proposal mentions making adjustments to the Kiesbesluit. And I wonder why, maybe because they feel, well, that's a quicker route or easier route. But at the end of the day, making recommendations to the government, if members of parliament are saying, well, the government isn't answering questions, and I'm not condoning that and saying it's right, but what we do have in our own hands and the ability to do is make changes to the Kiesverordnung. So my question is, why no consideration if we know that this is an issue from 3 years ago, from 2020 January? Why now, in our 4th year, we're now passing the buck to the government and telling them, change this? Because, Madam Chair, if you look at Article 51 of the Kiesverordnung, that actually gives the machtiging, so to speak, for the government to be able to do things by national decree, one has to question whether something as removing a curtain falls within the following, which is make it possible for details concerning the design and layout to be developed in national decree containing general measures. So what I'm saying is, when I read the explanatory memorandum of what the law intends the LBHAM to do, I don't know, I could be wrong, but is removing the curtain something of a level of privacy and more so of just a simple design and layout issue? But you know the way we could end that debate and not have Rolando Bryson question it or not is to put it instead in the Kiesverordnung, send it to the Raad van Advies, and they can tell us, is this an issue of privacy, constitutional issues, and so on? Because another issue that I also encountered, and I don't know if members of parliament are aware, but there's an initiative ordinance which we have informed the Secretary General that we would like to look at further. And that was at the time, I believe it was independent MP, or I'm not too sure what her status was at the time, but MP Leona Marlin. And I remember following at the time, it was a much touted and celebrated sort of initiative law that was going to allow let's say, those in the Netherlands or those off Ireland to still have a right to come back and vote, in short. And in theory, we sit down in this committee maybe at the time and say, boy, that's a great thing and everything. It goes to the Council of Advice, and the Council of Advice basically tells you, pump the brakes, you have a constitutional issue. Because your Constitution says this, your Constitution says that. Now, what does our Constitution say about the election? It says verbatim, it must be free, and it must be secret. That is at the top of be higher up than any Kiesbesluit, Kiesverordnung is what the Constitution says our election should be. So has that been taken account in accordance with Article 41 sub 2, that elections are free and held by secret ballot? Madam Chair, I would think the recommendation should be is, if the committee wants to continue to look at some measures, is to compile them and come with serious changes to the Kiesverordnung. That is the law that governs this at the highest level. We have right of initiative. I don't understand why we don't maybe use that more. It could be collective, could be factions work together, whatever. And then you get the Council of Advice position on this. You can maybe get some more external experts, and then you can ask the up faction what our position is. But right now, what I see is maybe you want advice or whatever. I don't know really how much further we can move with this proposal, because this proposal is basically to ask the government to do something, not to ask MP Bryson or anyone else to do something. But once it comes to a point where it needs to be voted on, I think I would be supportive of several changes to the Kiesverordnung, for example, to reconcile some of the issues that MP Leona Marlin had faced with the Council of Advice to see if maybe there's another way to do it. Those are some great initiatives. I think we also have to look at the Kiesverordnung that allows a European Dutch national to come 6 months before an election and vote. Those are things that we have to address in the Kiesverordnung, but I think that's the task of maybe the committee members, and we can see how much further on that. Last thing I want to bring up is this issue of the Bulgarian train, as it is called. And reference is made to the fact that the invalid vote, so there's always a dummy ballot that is vote or an invalid vote that is cast. And when I look at the numbers over the years, they have consistently been between 320 to a maximum of 385. That tells me that this trend is not a growing trend. This is something that has consistently existed from 2010 until last election. In other words, there is a consistent player or a consistent machine that has chosen to use this method over the years. And this is where I agree fully with MP Gumbs, that you can't legislate character. If there are institutions or organizations or people that are demonstrating this, and the statistics show that it's not to say that other people have joined on the train, pun intended, this has been someone or some people consistently doing this over the years, and you don't see the number of invalid votes going from 300 to 500 to 600. So we need to isolate who that is and find out. Maybe the message should be simply get investigators, get people, how you say, undercover cops. And then maybe you'll get your answers as to who has been behind this sort of method. But what the numbers and data show is that to make it seem like this is a new trend or an increasing trend is absolutely false. The numbers will show that this has been consistent since 2010 and 2020. I agree it needs to be stopped, but I don't think it needs to be stopped on the ordinance level. I think it needs to be stopped on an enforcement level. One final thing I want to mention, because a lot of people are kind of, I think we sound a bit negative in this meeting, but I think we should also give some positive credit to the majority of the population that I believe vote with integrity, vote to make a change, and vote not to accept something. I think that the population over time, if you see how political numbers have changed, if you see people who have had certain expectations to reach thousands of votes and they don't make it, if you see that people that are underdogs, who don't have any funding at all, some way make it into parliament, I think we have to give credit to the power of the voter over the years that has given the underdog the chance, that has given new candidates, new people, the opportunity to be a part of parliament. I mean, just look around. I think we are a testament of that. If this parliament was based on funding and vote buying, I don't think half of us would be in here today. It would be a much different composition. So I think we need to give some credit to the population that over time, they have matured and they have adjusted their method. So I think that will be my final message to the people of St. Martin. Again, I don't mean to say that this proposal is something that is, completely wrong. I think it's a good effort in the right direction, but just like MP Emmanuel, I think the details are missing, and the direction of going via the government instead of via ordinance is something I don't agree with. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Bryson. I now give the floor to MP Westcott Williams.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair Lady. Madam Chair Lady, looking at the examples and or sizes of locations as far as this proposal to do away with the curtains is concerned, Madam Chair Lady, a good example of utilizing a uncovered booth, so a booth without curtains, in a small location would be that of the Chamber of Commerce and their voting. So I wanted to give that one. And talking about proposals, and I say this to reinforce my request to this committee to meet with the government as far as electoral reform processes and projects are concerned. And that is a proposal that was made by, at the time, Prime Minister William Marlin with respect to electoral reform, and made a proposal to change the Constitution not to allow persons who left their party with the reason of forming another government, to allow them to participate in discussions of forming a new government. That proposal was rejected by our local council of advice, as well as the the Kingdom government because this was a proposed change to the Constitution of St. Martin. So I say that to reinforce my request that we hear from government. Are they actually doing anything with respect to electoral reform? And if so, what? Because even if we had to, anybody in here, one or more than one, come with changes, legislative proposals for change that would encompass electoral reform, you would need government's approval of that proposal in form of a law in order for it to be effected. So I maintain, and hence we had put some effort into sitting with the government and understanding what this electoral reform of the government was all about. At the time, we understood the government was having a survey done and to find out how persons on St. Martin thought about the electoral reform. What do people consider necessary to be reformed in the first place? So if that survey has been completed, it would be nice to know, first of all, what the exact questions were and what the responses were. So I would like to know if government has that information and what that information is. And then to you, Madam Chair Lady, as chairperson of this committee, I would ask if you can already indicate when you would be dealing with the request of MP Heiliger, and that is on the number 368. I say this to facilitate the Secretariat of Parliament to this committee for a meeting, and it is clear what the meeting request is. In addition to that, we also have, I want to give the number, and that is number 369 of the incoming documents, and that was my request to the government for information and for their view on some issues of changes that can be considered part of the electoral reform process. So, Madam Chair Lady, so with that, so again, government, if we really are serious about getting electoral reform, whichever part of it effected, it requires Parliament and government to be on the same page where that is concerned. In fact, it goes for anything really, in order to get laws ratified and passed and ratified. I mentioned the example of the Chamber of Commerce and their voting system, their booth system, so booths, like voting booths. And then I would like to know from this committee when some of the other matters that have been addressed to these committees, to this committee, will be dealt with. I thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. I give the floor to MP Rayon Peterson. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A good morning still to yourself, to my fellow colleagues, to the griffier and the staff, to everybody else tuned in throughout the various media outlets. Madam Chair, I think the PFP's stance on this proposal has been made clear, but hearing a lot of the opinions today, I want to sort of inform the people as to how things really work and what the actual reality is, because nobody's going to say it, but then I'll be the one, Madam Chair. The rumors after elections run rampant. I don't think that I'm the only one on this floor who has seen, faces of my colleagues sent to me with, as a selfie that the vote was cast on them. Let's not pretend that this is not an issue. I totally agree with MP Pantuflet when we say that we have to look at the voters. We have to look at why they are selling their votes, what's, pushing them to do this. And while that is a real issue, I also have to look at the politicians who condone this, the politicians who actually do this, the politicians who prey in those 3 months on the weak people out there who struggle to put bread on the table and go to them and say, you know what, if you would need any help, maybe you can help me. Because that's what happens in this country. And, like some MP said, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 10%, but if that 10% gets elected, then we have a problem. So let's not pretend that the issue is not there, because every single elections it comes out, and within a couple of months it goes back down the drain. That's what happens here in St. Martin. To look at informing the voters is one thing, but to actually do something about it is another. When you look at the legality and the technicality of things, Madam Chair, I feel the need to explain how it actually works, because I fear for misinformation on this floor sometimes. To start off, Madam Chair, it is not the prerogative of the members of Parliament by law to dictate anything that has to do with the inside of the polling station. That is the current law right now. An MP suggestion that the change should come on a national ordinance level goes actually completely against the exact wording of the law, which is to leave that decision in the hands of government. We look at our own kiesverordening, and we have to look a little bit further, and we have to look at Article 55, which specifically says, bij landsbesluit houden de algemene maatregelen, zo een LBHAM, kunnen nadere regels worden gesteld betreffende de inrichting van het stemlokaal. That already has been done. That already has been done, and the change that we are actually proposing is not a change that Parliament should do. Government doesn't even need our okay to do this, because the change is coming from within the landsbesluit houdende de algemene maatregelen, the LBHAM, that already exists. In Article 12, that article is what states that there is a curtain. That is coming from a landsbesluit, not us as Parliament. So it is not our prerogative, period. And you see, Madam Chair, when it is not our authority to legislate, but we feel the need to, that is when we overstep our boundary and we go against the trias politica. So again, Madam Chair, to reiterate, government does not need Parliament's okay to make this change, nor it is our duty to try to make it so, because we as legislators have this tendency to think that because we can legislate on a certain specific level, which is a national ordinance level, means that we actually have to. And a lot of the times when we do this, we mess up an already working system that goes down. And that is only maybe lacking in enforcement. So, verzadiging van de wetgeving is what we risk, and that is going to be the consequence every time we keep this up. And I'll just leave that at that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Bryson. I give the floor to MP Heilega Martin. Sorry. Thank you, MP Peterson. I give the floor, his name was next on the list, that's why, sorry. I give the floor to MP Heilega Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'd like to take this opportunity to maybe elucidate or break down or give the general public an understanding exactly what the Bulgarian train is. I mentioned it on some of my interviews. I think I did it in an article on Monday, but just to be clear how and what is happening right now. How it works is simple. The first person to walk in to the voters to the district, the district of whatever district you're on, you're going to vote, they walk in with a dummy ballot. They close the curtains and they switch the dummy ballot with an original ballot. So the curtains are closed, they can put the original ballot in their bag, take the dummy ballot, walk out, and place that in the bin, thereby forfeiting their vote. They go back to the orchestrator of whoever wants to buy the votes. They hand them over the original ballot. The orchestrator will then take a red color pencil, highlight the person they want the vote to go to. Another person will come in, take the original, bring it in, close the curtains, swap them again, and go in, put in the exact one with the vote on it, and bring back a clean slate. Now, with the request of the PFP faction to omit the curtains, and my suggestion to add barcodes, it will go as following. You won't be able to see the swapping, because then, they'll just go in. No picture taking, no swapping would happen, because it's clear. How they vote in front of them, no one will be able to see it, because you're just voting whatever your choice is. Your back is to the audience or whoever is there. And then you will go in, and then before putting it into the ballot, you scan. You scan, and then you add it into the ballot. This way, then you are guaranteed to not have any dummy ballot in there, because now with a dummy ballot in there, you can see it's tampered. Whether it's 10, 300, 400, once a dummy ballot in there, there's guaranteed that some kind of vote buying has occurred at that point. Now, I also want to make reference to what my fellow colleague MP George Ponteflat said, stated that we need to inform the people more get in there. And I think all 15 members of parliament, that if they do decide to run in next election, should make that part of their platform. Not educating the people, informing the people on the tasks and responsibilities of parliament and that of government, so they can understand the type of work we do, and also explain your platform and see if it resonates with them. It has to be our duty as well to educate the people, those that are not aware. I've had many people in the last election tell me that they'll vote for me so that I can become a prime minister. I'm voting so you can become a prime minister. That means the person doesn't understand that it's a parliamentary election. So yes, I asked every member of parliament, those that are planning to run next election, make that part of your platform. Inform those as well on the importance of what we do, so they understand who they're voting for and what they're voting for as well. That's all I wanted to say, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Heilige Martin. I give the floor to MP Bryson.
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you once again. Madam Chair, I am not changing my position on making it very clear that too much in Parliament, we hide behind saying that the government got to do it to kind of cover our own inaction. Madam Chair, the current law says, and I just read in Article 55, that the government can make changes regarding layout and design. Of course. What I am saying is, if you believe that the changing of the curtains are so paramount to the very democracy of our country, why are you allowing that to be delegated to the government? Madam Chair, in the time that the MPs, the last two MPs were speaking, I just drafted something. Landverordening van de datum tot wijziging van de kiesverordening om gordijnen te verbieden bij kieshokjes. Kort, landverordening stemhokjes zonder kieshokjes. Overwegende genomen dat het belangrijk is om de integriteit van de verkiezingen op Sint Maarten te beschermen, dat het belangrijk is om ervoor te zorgen dat niemand misbruik maakt van zijn privacy, heeft de Raad van Advies verhoord, etc. Artikel 55 wordt als volgt gewijzigd. De verkiezingskabines zullen geen gordijnen hebben. Just saying something. You have your framework there. And then the next article can say, further rules can be laid out by national decree. What I'm saying, if this debate is about something that's so important, why are you allowing it to do that? And don't tell me it can't be done. Because in this parliament, with the support of certain members of parliament in here, I brought an amendment to change the fact that the Minister of Finance was allowed by LB to sign international agreements such as CRS and FATCA. Because I had a fear that it is such of important national significance that the parliament must have a say if you are going to be signing international agreements with organizations like FATCA and CRS. But the LB allowed the minister to do it. I didn't pass the buck to then Minister Perry Heerlings. I said, Minister, we need to sit down and come to an amendment, because you have to ensure that the parliament is involved before you go sign these type of agreements that could destroy our financial system. And I didn't pass the buck to the minister as an opposition member. I sat with the minister in his office and we worked together and I brought the amendment. That is how we are supposed to function as parliament if you're serious about doing the job. That's all I'm saying. And then when it comes to parliament, such an example, and then it goes to the Raad van Advies and it comes here, then we can have a healthy debate on the subject. But 3 years, nothing happens. 1 year into election, pass the buck to the minister. If they don't do it, then you blame the government. What have you done? Why not change the Kiesordning when it's clearly possible and it's something that I, MP Bryson, have done with a much more complex and internationally affected law, which is the General Tax Law of St. Maarten? That's how we have to work. So I am not changing my stance. I would like to see if such changes need to come, make the adjustments to the Kiesordning. It's about time. There haven't been any changes, significant changes in 12 years. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Bryson. I now give the floor to MP Peterson.
Madam Chair, irony is going to be the word of the day for me today, because what was just mentioned is exactly the problem that I was talking about. What we just heard, a quickly drawn up initiative, that is exactly the issue. That is the exact problem that I'm mentioning, because now we're going to get a little bit technical. Now we're going to look at what the process is to change een LBHAM, een landsbesluit houdende algemene maatregelen. Because it was the intention of the legislator back then to make sure that it is not parliamentarians who dictate what a polling station looks like. You know why? Because that is the rat minding the cheese. That is us right here making sure that that polling station looks exactly how we want it to look so that we can do whatever we need. That is exactly why it was taken away from us as Statenleden, which is coming from a kiesverordening, which we established as Statenleden. And we delegated that onto the government for them to do a landsbesluit houdende algemene maatregelen. Why? Because that landsbesluit goes through a far more rigorous process than just an initiative from here, because that goes to the Council of Advice too. But it also goes to the whole of government. It goes to the Council of Ministers as well. They need to now do their due diligence to make sure that they, as government, as the executive branch, those who actually have to enforce what goes on at these polling stations, know what they're doing. But no, what we like to do as MPs is pretend that it's our prerogative, it is our job, so we have to legislate it. Well, guess what? If we passed that initiative that was just mentioned just now, we would have a problem with enforcing the kiesverordening, we would have a problem with enforcing the current landsbesluit, the LBHAM, that actually pertains to Article 55 that I just mentioned. The curtain is not that big of a discussion. The curtain is actually a discussion that fits right into Article 55 of the National Ordinance and current Article 12 of the Landsbesluit. So if we want to get technical with it, then I get it. But let's not give an emotional reaction and say that, 3 years have passed and no initiatives have been. Yeah, well, 3 years have passed and many initiatives have been sent, and the Council of Advice has chopped down most of them. That's a fact as well. So let's not pretend that this changing of an LBHAM, because the process seems or sounds as if it's just passing the buck to the government, means that that's a shorter process. No, it is not. It's actually a more informed and rigorous process than just us making an initiative, just like we just did on a Word document, and sending it straight to the Council of Advice. So let's up the standard and let's get serious about this, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Peterson. I give the floor to MP Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair Lady. I am not a member of this committee, so yeah. Whew. Madam Chair, if it's not broken, don't fix it. What's the data on vote buying in this country? What's the data? We have data? I remember one time when we was talking about Front Street, one member of Parliament said, show me the data. Show me the data on Front Street. What's the data, Madam Chair, on vote buying in the country? Because from when I listen, is simply to prevent cell phones. That's the explanation that was given, to prevent you going in with your cell phone and selling your vote. But Madam Chair, again, if I go in with a ballot like this, right? A ballot like this, and I can understand when my colleague said, well, they have never seen it at Menful Hazel, but I know for a fact that all the years that I have been voting and going into the ZAL, going into the voting station, there's always people there because I have done it to myself. I have been a recorder for the amount of people that goes in. I have sat in there. Almost every polling station have recorders from different political parties on the inside. And this is what I'm saying. So, okay, that is to prevent the cell phones. All right, fine. But I'm sure, here we have my colleague, MP Pantaflet, sitting behind me. He can see who I vote for. So I can make sure, tell that person outside, you make sure that my $20 here ready for me, because your man of business who inside there going confirm. He saw me take the pencil and mark it over there by you, because that's where your number is at. That's where your number is at. Because now everybody can see. Because I would want to believe this, the issue for the curtain is the privacy. The privacy is the reasons why we have the curtains. Now, don't get me wrong, now, I am asking the questions, the reason for removing it. It can't simply be the cell phone. That's what I'm asking. What's the reason behind it? So we're going to remove the curtain, and then what? There must be some other level of privacy the individual can have going into the booth, being free, clear of mind, not just the walls in between him. What about the wall behind him? Everyone is seeing, everyone can see. People are nervous. That's why I'm asking the question. That's why I'm asking these questions. And then to come to this, taking out one ballot and putting one ballot inside, how do they get the first ballot? How do they get that first ballot? Because, Madam Chair, you can ask for a new ballot if you think you make a mistake. So, in other words, it's a train that they are running, based from what I'm hearing. So you go inside, and they call out your name. Not only do they call out your name, they call out your number. And they hand you that ballot. You go inside the booth. What do you do with that ballot? You take that ballot and you put it in your pocket, and then you pull out another ballot that was given to you from the outside, and you come back outside of the booth and you shove that one inside. But the first ballot to start the train, how do they get that? How do they get that first ballot to start the train? Come on now. Come on now. How does it work? How does it work? Madam Chair, I want to believe, Madam Chair Lady, that the reasons for the curtain is privacy. Privacy. And you can be free, sound of mind, peace of mind, to go and cast your vote for whomever you want, with nobody or anyone around you having an idea who you vote for. If that is the case, you have to leave the security by the door, say, no cell phones, put your cell phones here, check the pockets, check the bags, check this, something. If it's just the cell phone, for me, Madam Chair, is not enough. It can't simply be just the cell phone. That we have to remove the curtain. I'm asking the reason. There's got to be something more. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you, MP Emmanuel. I give the floor to MP Gumbs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My colleague, MP Peterson, already kind of stated what I was going to say regarding the inclusion of having the polling stations further regulated by LBHAM. I was explained, that this is done to allow some flexibility, to allow government to have some flexibility when it comes to making changes, because the legislative process can take so long. But of course, MP Peterson went into more of the technicalities of why this was taken out of the hands of Parliament, which I fully agree with, because then you have that incidence of the rats minding the cheese. Further to that, Madam Chair, it is as simple as preventing persons from taking pictures of their cast votes. And I'd like to share a personal experience I had at the 2020 election, my first election as a candidate and as a party leader. I was standing at the Belvedere Community Center, greeting voters as they were walking in, and there was a gentleman walking around with his voter card and his passport in his hand. He approached one of my candidates, and my candidate started talking about the stance of the party, etc. And the gentleman said, I have a bus I gotta fix for $300. I need $300. And I was listening to this exchange between my candidate and this voter, and my candidate said, we don't do that here. The gentleman said, well, then I don't need to talk anymore. Walked off, and he went to a Jeep in which persons representing someone from a faction that is sitting in this parliament currently had a conversation with the gentleman. And the voter went into the Belvedere Community Center with his passport and his voter card in his hand, and he walked out with his cell phone in his hand. And he walked back over to that Jeep, showed them his phone, collected something that he stuffed in his pocket, and then ran off towards the towers in Belvedere. So it really is as simple as taking down the curtain to prevent persons from taking out their phones. At the start of the polling station, it says you're not allowed to be in there with your phone. But we get into the very technical and ticklish discussion if we are trying to take people's phones from them and put them in a box. You're depriving people of their private property. Who is going to mind these phones? These two phones right here, except for size, are black. Who's going to say which phone is whose? Who's going to make sure that this is the phone I get back? You cannot frisk persons on their way to vote either, because that is not the definition of free and fair elections. Taking down the curtain does not have anything to do with voter privacy. Their privacy is guaranteed by the walls of the booth. The world over, there is no legislation that I found while preparing this this initiative letter for the Prime Minister that says that a curtain guarantees your privacy. Not one. We have 2-meter or 3-meter walls that are also mentioned in the LBHAM. It's not mentioned that the curtain is there to guarantee privacy because the walls already do that. In fact, observing from outside last election at Milford Hazel, I saw a voter go in, didn't even bother to pull the curtain across. Simply cast his vote and threw the ballot in the thing and walked out. So I really do find it a moot discussion. And then, you know, to perhaps quote Shakespeare a bit, methinks they doth protest too much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Gumbs. I give the floor to MP Bryson.
Yeah, okay. Thank you once again, Madam Chair. I too am not a member of this committee, but I'm happy I was here because left unchecked, this is my issue like I started with, the lack of balanced approach. We are acting, we just heard that it's like the miracle cure is just remove the curtains. You had another member of parliament literally demonstrate the flaw in that, and that is ignored. Like, there ain't no problem. But I want to reiterate again, more dangerous to our democracy than vote buying is political intimidation. We've had that for years. I have an issue with people being able to look like what MP Emmanuel described and say you went this way or that way. Because he described it maybe in the way of somebody doing something illicit. But what about the innocent person that's an educator, for example, and goes to vote in another direction and then gets political intimidation the next day? This has happened for decades in St. Martin, and it has calmed down, thankfully, over the last few years, but perhaps some people want to bring that back. So we have to ensure that there's a balanced approach. All I said from the start is, either you do it yourself, and you could come with whatever excuses you want why you can't do it yourself, or if you issue it to the government, ensure that it's a balanced approach. Let's not ignore the issue of privacy. Let's address it. Don't just ignore what some of the members of parliament did, because then don't ask for no meeting. Then we can't say what we see as a flaw. It is a balanced approach that is necessary. There is an international standard. I will say again, I would encourage members of the committee to go and read those guidelines to make sure that they are in line with what we do. It's the International Electoral Standards Guidelines from the Institute of Democracy and Electoral Assistance, where they do reference curtains and protection of the voter. So again, I encourage more research to be done, and let's get to work. There's one other thing I forgot to mention, Madam Chair, and that's something to also consider about the electronic side, if consideration is being taken to cybersecurity. I don't want to go too much into detail of that, but we know that St. Martin and the government has had issues with this in the past. That whatever is done digitally, if this is going to the government, I would like it to be stated for the record that they ensure deep cybersecurity is involved in the discussion about digitizing our electoral process. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Bryson. I now give the floor to MP Westcott Williams.
Chair Lady, thank you once again. And I just want to continue on my point of the need for having some type of a understanding, especially for issues such as these, in terms of how the government looks at and whether they agree with some of the things that are being proposed or suggested by members of parliament or factions within parliament. Much mention has been made of the role, the advisory role of the Council of Advice, and that is so true. It's an important role. When it comes to initiative legislation, and it should also be mentioned that in our case, you don't have the complete freedom how to draft legislation. The government doesn't have it, and the parliament doesn't have it, because we follow certain manuals with respect to guidelines for legislation, etc. However, the point that I want to make in raising the issue of the Council of Advice is that in different words, but for every draft initiative that I have done, and I have quite a few, the recommendation / question of the Council of Advice has been, what is the government's position on this particular matter? Is it really necessary to regulate what you seek to regulate by national ordinance? Does the government have a policy on what you as an individual or faction is proposing? So again, I want to stress the importance of the coordination where certain things are concerned, and I look forward to this committee taking the lead in asking government to come to Parliament and apprise us of what they're doing in the context of electoral reform, so that we can also get the opinions of the factions in Parliament on what government is doing as far as electoral reform is concerned. So open and frank discussion with the government, like the one we're having here right now, I think is extremely important on this topic. A topic that the government felt so important that they put out a survey to the people of St. Martin to get their input on the need for and for what parts of electoral reform live out there in the community. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. I give the floor to MP Solange Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to jump in. I am disturbed to hear that persons are behind of you looking to see where you vote. I don't remember that happening at our polling station in Cahill, Madam Chair, but maybe it does. And if that is the case, then again, we do need to look at not only the removal of the curtain and the design of the booth, but where the booths are placed, plain and simple. Then we just turn the booths so that our backs face the wall. I love to look at this video from Obama when he was voting and a guy told him don't talk to his girlfriend. He was right next door. Of course, they use computers, but there is a wall directly behind of the voters. So if that is a plain and simple solution, then I think that would be a good way to go about it. Madam Chair, I would like to know if the main voting bureau produces any reports in general. They are the ones that are on the ground doing the work, and so I think it would be nice for this committee to receive any reports, any observations, any recommendations from the main voting bureau, because we have indeed been, it's 12 years now since we have had a number of different elections, and so any recommendations from them to this committee, I believe, would be valuable. I think in the past proposals have included their observations, so I would just like to ask if that would be possible, just to see their recommendations in regards to this particular topic. And that's my 2 cents, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Duncan. I now give the floor to MP Pontiflet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very, very important, interesting debate, discussion on this matter. We started out with a proposal by MP Gumbs in order to have the curtain removed from behind the person who's voting, and we went into very important aspects of elections as to how this should take place. I believe Madam Chair, this is a clear example of the reality of how when you pitting let's say the government versus the parliament and so on, decrees versus ordinances, it shows you that as we go along, that things have to be adjusted. But I want to tell us definitely that there will never come a time when we'll be able to completely prevent things that they don't want to see take place, things mentioned as voters, intimidation, vote buying, and so on. These things, Madam Chair, will not be prevented completely. One of my colleagues mentioned the matter of the guidelines for the advisory council, guidelines that we should follow when it comes to the advisory council, manuals, and so on. I believe that those should be looked at also because nothing is written in stone and understood in stone. They should be looked at because I think it's important that as much as possible the public have a clear understanding as to voting and what their vote means. Forgive me, Madam Chair, and this is my final remark. The issue of putting the ballots in your pocket and going with the other ballot that you get from the persons who are in the main voting bureau, I was trying to follow because I voted many times, but I thought that once your number and name is called, that your ballots are stamped, the one that you have put into the booth. So I was trying to figure out how does the other one get into the booth. I didn't follow the discussion or the conversation very well, so I would like to get an explanation as to how that really happens, where you get your ballot, it is stamped, and then I heard that the person has a dummy ballot that they show outside and throw into the ballot box. I didn't get it at all, so I would like to have some explanation on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Pontiflet. I give the floor to MP Gumbs.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Just one brief remark to add. A few of my colleagues have mentioned consulting the voting bureau, etc. In the run-up to elections from postulation and thereforward, you have several sessions as a party representative. As one of the only party leaders that was actually at those sessions, the voting bureau themselves mentioned barcoded ballots, removing the curtain, and some other measures as to improving on and securing our electoral process. So this, while it is something that I personally have thought as an option for improving our electoral process, the voting bureau just solidified that particular sentiment, and having spoken to the former chairperson directly as well, the removal of the curtain and MP Heiliger-Martin's suggestion of barcoded ballots was also stated by the voting bureau in those sessions as a way of a version of electoral reform. So I just wanted to make that clear as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Gumbs. I give the floor to MP Heiliger-Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to respond to my colleague, MP Pontiflet, the person would come in with the dummy ballot either in their pocket or in a bag. And when they go behind the closed curtains and they can swap it by putting it back in their pocket or putting it back in their bag. No, but by the time you get to the ballot, you already folded it and you put it in. So no one sees which one is going in, if it's the ballot or the original. So by the time you fold it, it's a white paper. All dummy ballots are white, unless we can do two things. Make the dummy ballot pink so that they can't walk in with a dummy ballot, but at least everyone can see someone coming in and putting in their the original thing in. Or we can also say no bags allowed. But if a person comes in the front of the line, they have the bag, allow them to go back in the car, put their bags in, and go in. No bags allowed. Well, yeah, we can. Those are the type of things we can see. But maybe make the dummy ballots pink or red or whatever color you want, so that there's a distinction between the dummy ballot and the original ballot. Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Heiliger-Martin. I give the floor to MP Emmanuel.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I like the back and forth we going this week. It seems as if every time I speak, then my colleague, MP Gumbs, speaks next, and then this one goes back and forth. I mean, it's not like we hanging up jerseys like an NBA game, like she said in her live. But I'm saying, Madam Chair, it can't simply be just removing the curtain. And my colleague, Duncan, explained it well. And that's what I said in the beginning. You cannot have your back. Your back is facing people. And now they are saying that you're on, this one is on that side and that one is on that side, so they can't see. So you got cross-eye. You can't see. I can't see horizontal. So you're really telling me, because I'm sitting on the side, marking down who all is coming in, and we have 4 booths inside the hall with no curtain, but because I'm sitting horizontal on the side, I can't tilt my head so and see where that person going to vote. That's what you're really saying? You can see. The fact is you can see inside of the booth. That's what I'm asking. It can't just simply be removing the curtain. And in the beginning, I never said for or against. I am asking what else comes with it? What else comes with it? Because they are saying the walls in between protects your privacy. Yes, from the individual who's next to you casting their vote too as well. I am talking about the persons behind you. I am talking about the persons to the side of you that are sitting, taking the record. I'm talking about the staff. I am talking about everyone else who are in the booth. They can see. I don't understand how people can't understand that you're in this booth standing up. You're moving your hand left, right to see which one they can see. That's why I'm asking the question. Are we going to position the booth differently? Are we going to turn them around? How is it going to be? No one should be able to predict, to see, to assume, to guess, to think because of an action that you do inside the booth. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. No, the walls in between ain't protected, no privacy. Once the curtain is removed. The privacy is no one seeing what you're doing inside, period. And it's interesting that someone was selling their vote and they want money because they got a van. They gone in and they come out and they go in a van. You follow them all the way? All of that whole transaction you saw? It's interesting. It's very, very interesting. It's amazing, Madam Chair. I am asking the question, is it just simply removing the curtain? Something else must be there to protect that individual's privacy. It's not enough for me. And if it's just that alone, it will not get my support. It's not enough for me, Madam Chair Lady. I thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Emmanuel. I give the floor to MP Heilige Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you, if it's possible, I'd like to ask MP Emmanuel to be a little clear. Is MP Emmanuel saying that the staff is the staff assigned to that district is the ones that can see, and it is the staff that are the ones that will announce to the parties that this person voted here, this person voted here? Because as far as I can recall, and I also vote at Hope Estate, and I used to vote back at Academy back in the days, but now that I'm registered at a different place, I vote in Hope Estate. I remember that when the voting poll is closed, then and only then can the party's representative go in and observe the counting. I don't remember a party representative sitting in there while the voting is going on. I don't recall that. I only observed the staff assigned to the poll. So if you're saying that's new for me, MP. So if possible, through you, Madam Chair, if MP Emmanuel can please clarify exactly what he meant by who is observing and who will inform the parties, because if it's the staff, then wow, that's new for me.
Thank you, MP Heilige Martin. I give the floor to MP Bryson.
Yes, Madam Chair, I wanted to touch on that aspect indeed. When you go, let's say, to certain polling stations, there's certain things that the government can implement and can allow, and that is determined. I don't know if it's within the LBHAM or ministerial decree. I was just trying to search for it. But in terms of who can observe, And also, when, let's say, for example, at the former Leonard Connell School there in Colby, it's a classroom. When you're walking, you look to your left, you can see the entire, to your left directly are the voting booths. The only thing preventing you from seeing is the curtain. So that's where we're saying, for example, what about the positioning of the booth? I echo the same thing, guys. It's not just a one-stop solution, remove the curtain and that's it. That's all we're saying. There are other factors to consider. Where are you allowing, yes, also the staff, where are you allowing them to sit? The police officers, observers, where do you allow people to line up? Do you make sure the windows are closed, but then when it's closed, everybody gets hot? All of those considerations in a package, with the indulgence of the MPs bringing these up, can that please go into consideration? Because there is more to it. And I do also, I've kind of heard and Googled a little bit about this whole Bulgarian train thing. Again, MP Emmanuel asked about the data. If it is, the system describes that it is contingent on a certain number of invalid votes. Okay, so because if somebody is putting a dummy ballot in there, it means that you should see across polling stations a consistent number of invalid votes, right? So if one individual or one party is doing this, it would be different than if 5 individuals or 5 perpetrators at their call are doing it. You would see an increase over the years in the number of invalid votes. What I am saying is 2016, 313, 2018, 365, 2020, 333, 314 in the previous year, 323 the previous year. It is always around that amount. If this is a practice that is so prevalent, what you would see is 1 year 320, the next year 400, the next year 500. Again, it appears from the numbers that this has been done consistently from 2010 to now by one perpetrator or the same perpetrators. So if you're serious about trying to stop it, investigate that. That is also a competency of the authorities to be able to find out what is going on, because the numbers are not showing. Yes, we need to stop it. I agree with that. But I don't want it to sound like this is an increasing phenomenon when the numbers do not show that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Bryson. I give the floor to MP Emmanuel. Okay, so MP Emmanuel does not actually wish to have the floor. I believe that I see no more names on the sign-in mechanism we have here, so I would then assume that the deliberations on this topic has come to a close. However, I would also like to chime in on the proposal from MP Gumbs. One that I think is also not a bad proposal. Actually, I can see where we can put this into play. However, I believe this meeting today have brought to the forefront a number of, not issues, but I see observations and I see solutions as well that can be added to MP Gumbs' proposal that may make this process one that is more feasible for all concerned. I believe we've heard here today numerous MPs talk about vote buying and how we can curb that. And I would have to agree with MP Gumbs. That is a matter of character, and indeed something that I say often enough is that our electorate need to look at who they are choosing to represent them and what they get when they allow themselves to be bought. Having said that, I would propose that our committee, Electoral Reform Committee, have a working meeting where we can actually look at all of these different discussions, these different points that were brought up, and see how it can be worked out. and possibly add it to the proposal of MP Gumbs, because I believe we've sat here for 2 hours and we've been hearing the same things over and over and over, and basically not really come to a solution. So that would be my proposal. I see MP Heiligam, no? MP Bryson, would you like to have the floor?
Yes, Madam Chair. Let me first of all thank you for, again, hosting this, organizing this meeting, and the requesters as well. I think it was a very healthy debate, allowing us to see the various angles and concerns. I do agree with your proposal, but I also think it is warranted, as I believe it was MP Westcott Williams mentioned, in terms of position of the government, because if the proposal is ultimately to then say, send it and address it via the Kiesbesluit, contrary to, let's say, maybe how I propose it, in the meantime, while we are working out those details, that should be done. So perhaps as chair of the committee, you can send a follow-up letter if members of the committee agree. I'm not a member of the committee, but I'm making a suggestion to you that committee chairs can also address themselves to the relevant minister, and perhaps it's time that based on the various requests, a formal address goes from you to the relevant ministers to get that feedback. So that's a suggestion I can give to the committee because I can't make any proposal.
Thank you, MP Bryson. I would like to agree with that proposal as well. MP Westcott Williams, would you like to have the floor?
Thank you once again, Madam Chair Lady. Yes, Madam Chair Lady, I heard your proposal. I just wanted to caution that it is not brought in such a manner that then the government, rather than responding to the proposals that are with them, take a wait-and-see attitude because this committee is going to, come back and debate several issues. So I agree with the proposal recommendation that a letter goes to government. I think we definitely should hear from them as well. And in that context, I would like them to take into consideration proposals from all of the members, including myself, to the government with respect to electoral reform, so that we could have a comprehensive discussion and really look at those items that without too much ado can be processed as far as electoral reform is concerned. So I just wanted to add that. I look forward to that being included in any letter going to government from this committee on this matter. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. So, MP Westcott Williams, as you are a member of this committee, your proposal is heard. I would like to look to the floor of the committee and see who agrees with this proposal. We agree. And what about the proposal for us? Because, of course, indeed, it is important that all of these proposals are taken into consideration. And what about the proposal to have us meet as the committee to have a working meeting to trash out other proposals? I look to the floor. MP Gumbs?
Sorry, Madam Chair, because I did not hear your proposal the first time. So if you could repeat what it was exactly.
Thank you, MP Gumbs. No, I said that in this meeting we've heard various suggestions and solutions as well that may also be considered for adding, to the various proposals that have been made thus far. So I would like us to come together as a committee and have a working meeting to look at those proposals and see how they can also be added. MP Westcott Williams.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair Lady. Madam Chair Lady, just for the record, I want to state that here within Parliament, in addition to the work of this committee, which led to a terms of reference, which I have questioned how far are we with that and when can that actually be sent out. In addition to that, there are several proposals regarding electoral reform here in Parliament. If the chair is interested, I have an overview of those and I can provide these not only from members of Parliament, draft initiative laws, as well as proposals from members of the general public that are here at Parliament and that addresses some aspect of electoral reform. So in addition to the tour, which I think we need to pick up as soon as possible and deal with, there are also several other proposals and recommendations, even draft draft laws have been submitted by persons of the public to Parliament in the context of electoral reform. So what I'll do, I'll provide that overview to the chair of this committee to give you an idea of all of the things that are within Parliament on electoral reform. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. I understand that and I know of the several proposals, but I still think that it is our duty as the committee to, because what we're doing right now is that we're discussing, proposals. And I would just like us to actually come together as a committee, some of those proposals that are already on the table, for us to have a look together as a committee and see what can be done with that. So that is basically what I'm proposing here today, MP Westcott Williams.
Madam Chair Lady, a brief response. I don't think we're saying different things. What I'm saying is that we have many proposals regarding. So is it the intention that we look at all of those, or we focus on the most recent ones? So that was my question, because we have several proposals that include some very interesting aspects of electoral reform. So again, I'm going to put that overview out, and then so that we can say, yeah, this is one we want to have a discussion on as we look at the other topics. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. And that is exactly what I'm basically saying, for us to look at what we have and see how we can make amends or what we can do with those proposals. I see we still have another member wishing to have the floor, MP George Pontiflet.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, I definitely agree that we should look at all of them, but at the same time, let us prioritize those that we know should be handled first. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Pontiflet. I look at the speakers list and I see there's no need for any further deliberation. I want to thank all of the committee members here today and the viewing and listening public for their participation in this meeting today, and I hereby close this meeting. Meeting closed.